even though I've made a lot of beginner videos, I'm still getting a lot of questions from people who are just kind of having some basic issues with just using the machine and just feeling comfortable using a total gym or sliding bench trainer, which is to be expected because it's not the most intuitive machine. The more I've kind of realized that even though you're watching a lot of these videos and content, it's not as easy to kind of translate some of these kind of foundational setups, which I'll get into in this video, to someone who's just using it for the first time. So a lot of this is coming for people that are beginners, those with injuries, or simply people that are just wanting to feel more comfortable using the equipment. So I wanted to make a more fleshed out video going over what I believe are some of the foundational considerations with technique and setup, specifically using a total gym. This will be a little bit longer. I'll put some timestamps down below if you guys want to check that out. This video motivated me to actually put together a beginner playlist, so I'll start doing that and compiling that so I can start pointing people to that particular playlist, or maybe discovering this channel for the first time. And I basically, again, just wanted to make a video that I could point people towards that I think would address, at least at this point in time when I'm looking at things, that are kind of the main issues that people are having when they first approach this equipment. Because I've had many people tell me, even though they've watched some of the videos, that they get the equipment, but they still just feel like something's missing. They're feeling a little lost on just kind of how to set their body up for some of these positions. So that's what I'll go over in this video, because I really just want people to kind of reap the benefits from using this equipment. I love this equipment, and I can see where a lot of people might use it a few times and they just don't believe in it, or they feel like it wasn't for them. And I want you guys to really just reap the benefits from getting the most out of the total gym or any other piece of equipment you guys are using. So I have my wife record this. So this isn't the best sound quality. I tried some wireless mics. None of them really worked out that well. So hopefully this recording comes out okay. I thought it was easier instead of doing a voiceover to just kind of talking to the camera. So thank you to my wife for helping me record this. That was definitely helpful. It made it easier. In this video, I'll talk about some key elements about setting it up, from how to sit with things with kind of key posture, to key elements about various movement patterns like the pushing and pulling and single joint exercise, and also kind of set yourself up to how to do proper leg exercises. And at the end, I'll lay out some simple programming tips. A lot of these things I have kind of addressed. There's some new things I haven't really gone into, but I don't think I've gone in this much detail in one video. So I wanted to make this kind of a focal point that I can point people towards. And if you yourself know somebody who either picked this up and you think this video could help them out, definitely share it. And as always, if you guys like this content, please consider liking and subscribing. It's always helpful. But here's the video. And again, thanks you guys for watching.
All right, so when you first get started, I would keep this at a moderate height. Now, depending on where you're coming from, if maybe if you're used to going to the gym and working out, or you have a history with weight training, or if you're just getting this machine for the first time, you could be younger or older, whatever. The point is, I find that the majority of people do find this thing a little different and awkward the first time you use it. And that's kind of understandable, because you're sitting on this, one, it's just an incline, so you're getting used to kind of pulling and pressing and doing exercises constantly at this incline where you're not level. And secondarily, just the fact that this thing's constantly kind of moving. So just kind of getting used to sitting on the machine for the first time can be kind of awkward. So that's okay if it does feel awkward. It's going to feel awkward and weird. You'll definitely get used to it as we kind of go along with this. But I would say like a moderate setting would be good. There's some people who are maybe already kind of in decent shape, or they're just kind of have natural strength, or just kind of bigger people, that pulling and pressing things will be easier, and they might feel like, well, this might feel kind of easy. Don't worry, we'll definitely talk about technique stuff where you can make things harder or easier. The point is, I would pick something moderate. If it's too low, again, I won't really appreciate the machine, and actually sometimes they can make it harder to get in and out of the machine if it's too low for the first time using it. So we have the safety pin attached. I will reference some of those 4 positions that I will show on the screen here, but I did some other videos talking about that for beginners. An easy way of approaching the machine is just basically kind of like this 4-positional approach, basically saying that you can look at exercises where you're seated facing the machine, exercises where you're seated facing away from the machine, and then there's positions where you're either lying down on your back or lying down on your stomach on the machine. It's like the 4 total positions. I might reference that a little bit, but right now all we're going to do is talk about first, how would you, just some foundations to just pulling, and then foundations to pressing. And we'll start with pulling first. We'll first talk about just setting up and posture on the machine, because that's a big important thing a lot of people don't think about. And also we'll just address some little safety things, or just kind of things to think about when you're first sitting on the machine that can feel awkward for some people, or maybe feel unstable for some people. So with the thing fully kind of, the pulleys attached, the cables are just going to be fully extended or whatever. When I set up to do any kind of a pulling motion, I'm just going to grab the same side handles, and I'm just going to let the sled kind of move like this. Just step over the sled and then just simply sit down. That seems kind of basic enough, but even this, I've seen people kind of feel really uncomfortable, meaning maybe they do something like this, they sit down first, then they try and reach here and grab it, or their hands are kind of moving around and they're gonna sit, and as they're sitting down, the machine is moving. If you're someone who's even like on the morbidly obese side, I understand this can feel a little uncomfortable. So either way, you might want to have something close by. If I had a squat stand or something close by to hold on to, that would be good. Otherwise, again, you're holding the same side, my arms are gonna be straight out, don't move them too much, and then just simply sit down. Now for pulling exercises, it won't matter too much about where you're seated. I mean, as long as you're somewhat, basically on the glide board, you can't really mess this up. For pressing, I'll show you where it can make a difference. Definitely, you guys can mess around with this. Once you go into pulls, you can sit far back on the glide board. You can sit a little bit more higher up to get yourself a little more engaged. You can sit somewhere moderate. But the point is, you're just sitting on the machine neutral. Now, just from this position here, one thing to kind of think about as you're only just sitting here holding the handles. One, this is a minor safety tip, but it can happen with some people. I'd recommend having a closed grip, meaning that your thumbs are going to be wrapped around the handles like this, instead of an open grip where you're like that. These things can kind of like slide out of your hands. So when you're doing this, I recommend just having kind of a closed grip like this. Arms are straight. The biggest thing right now I'm going to emphasize is just your posture. So as you're kind of seated upright, it might feel awkward for some people. Well, I want to sit just kind of nice and tall here. You could sit straight, but more so almost like you're water skiing. If you're pretending you're kind of water skiing, kind of sitting back like this. Most people just kind of sit naturally like this, and you kind of want to avoid that. So with everything, I'm going to say with good posture, sitting up nice and tall, not just sitting up tall, but now I want to kind of tuck my shoulder blades back. That's something kind of key to think about. Because once we kind of going into rowing, the biggest thing people will start doing is people just start doing this type of action. Notice there's really no movement back here. I want to have it where as I'm rowing, I can see essentially the middle of my back is moving. So the middle of my back is extending out and kind of stretching out. Then as I row, it's really coming back and retracting. So if I'm sitting upright and tall, that's going to be good. That doesn't necessarily guarantee though that you could still be doing this and not getting that range of motion in the middle of my back. But the other thing to kind of consider is also my shoulders. So as I'm kind of rowing, as I'm opening up my chest and kind of squeezing the middle of my back, I'm also not pointing my shoulders. So if I start doing this, which is natural, when I start rowing like this, really what's happening is I'm using my bicep muscles to kind of pull myself in, and even some of my shoulders, even my lats, to kind of extend my elbows or extend my shoulder. Extending my shoulder means like essentially bringing it back this way. That's fine to an extent. I mean, you're still working muscles like in your arms and your back, you're gonna work regardless. We wanna work more of our lat muscles and a little more of our middle back as well to kind of get the best of both worlds. So in order to do that, as I'm rowing, I don't want my shoulder to point. I want my shoulder, if there was an imaginary arrow on my shoulder, I want that arrow to kind of stay upright as I'm rowing. So you can see the difference. This is what most people naturally will gravitate towards. All right, and what I want to see is as I'm rowing, my chest is opening up and my shoulders essentially still staying upright. All right, now depending on the person, that might feel pretty easy, that could feel hard enough depending on where I'm at. I won't go into this so much here, but just recognize there's so many different variations, even to simple pulling and rowing, that you can do. I personally sometimes like to kind of cross the grip. This way I get a little more range of motion in the middle of my back, kind of engage my middle of the back as well. Sometimes I use this middle carabiner clip you guys can see here. I always leave kind of one on there. Notice that I actually took off the Total Gym screw pins. That can be good or bad, but the problem is these things are good to have these carabiner clips on there. The only problem is I found is that sometimes I can do stuff where I'm crossing and you'll have like something like that happen where it gets stuck. That's probably why Total Gym opted for these screw type mechanisms here, because you're less likely to have this crossing or these things kind of get stuck together. But sometimes, yeah, I might take one of these and I'll loop it on to maybe this side, and now I can do a single arm row where I'm sitting up nice and tall, just like I would in the gym, and I'm pulling that way. So there's a number of things you can do. There's a number of different ways I can row, different positions I can row at, different grips, different ways to kind of row high or lower or something like that, or more kind of like moderate. But the next thing I want to touch on, since we're just talking about the basic pulling and kind of thinking about, we're still just talking about basic setup of the machine, is just the way your body lean is and whether or not to kind of have your feet on the ground. For a lot of people, just getting the feet like how I like to hold it here can feel a little unstable and also just obviously uncomfortable for some people. To me, I like this a lot. You know, this way I can kind of sit up a little higher. I can do things this way. You guys know sometimes I'll even kind of stand sometimes. But the point is, all sorts of ways you can do it. If you're someone who's kind of just getting going, you can use your legs as kind of like a nice benefit to kind of help you keep yourself stable. You can just simply take them off the ground a little bit. Sometimes I'll even sit up. If you sit up nice and high, it's easier to do. There's even times where I might even sit just kind of cross-legged for whatever reason and just do rows this way. So really it's whatever you're comfortable with. The only thing that really matters is that you're still keeping this nice straight back and posture, and you're still rowing with that nice straight shoulder that's kind of up and down versus kind of cranking it that way. All right, so since we're talking about pulling, I might as well just throw this part in here. We're just gonna do this simple total gym, just pull up. These are pretty much self-explanatory. Once these are in here, I mean, this doesn't really need much instruction other than saying that, you know, where I'm seated on the glide board can make a difference. If I'm laying too far low, you can see here as I pull up, I kind of stop short. For most of you, I think you might realize that kind of seems kind of maybe a little obvious to do that, but for some people it's not. So scoot yourself up as much as you can, as much as comfortable. This way I can get a lot more, you know, greater pull down and not get stuck with the machine. Now, a couple things to think about is I want to avoid kind of doing this where my elbows are kind of flaring downwards. I ideally want them to kind of track the sides of my body as if I was doing a strict pull-up. That just allows us to engage more of our lats, use a little bit less of our biceps, but don't be surprised if it's your first time doing it, you start seeing yourself kind of cranking this way. Try and think as straight a line as possible. So as I'm down, everything's lengthened. My head's kind of in neutral between my biceps, between my arms, and I'm gonna pull straight up in a straight line and then come slowly back down. You can see as I'm doing this, I'm actually kind of shaking my arms are shaking a little bit. It forces you to kind of really isolate those muscles as I'm doing it. And some people have said, I think in that video, that beginner video, that the person was saying how they felt like one arm was pulling more than the other, and that's kind of normal and to be expected. But just trying to make it as much as you can over time that both arms are doing equal amount of work. So we'll talk about pressing exercises or setting up for doing any kind of a pushing exercise or chest exercises. And this can probably be the most trickiest thing for most people. Again, I don't want to sit in the machine and then have myself kind of back up and do this. I could do this, but then you're risking this little pulley might kind of fly off. Now, for some people, it can be hard to kind of maneuver and grab this machine from different angles. What I'm going to say you do is have your left hand, grab that left handle, just kind of swing around sideways, hold that in your hand. Go ahead, have your right hand reach the other handle. Walk a little bit as the sled is going to move, and then as it's in this position, just like we said before, I don't want to start jerking my hands around, because then as soon as I do that, you're going to feel this thing move and you're going to feel a little unstable, like this thing's moving around on you. Just keep this, your arms kind of wherever they are, just take a little step over, and then from here, just sit down. And then from here, yeah, you don't want to like muscle it up. Some people have their shoulders aren't as capable to kind of do that. You can kind of use your legs, walk yourself up till you're in the start position. I'll talk about this in a second. But this is the only thing where it might be, you pay a little special attention to where you're sitting on the glide board. I basically don't want to be sitting too far low. Like this might seem like a nice normal place to sit. You're in the middle of the glide board. But once I start doing some pushing, you're going to see I'm going to get locked up there at the end. So for the pushing stuff, if you do end up sitting this low, just kind of scoot up a little bit. Not too far, but you could do this. Just about 3/4 of the way far, and this is going to be where you're going to be setting up. All right, so this would be a nice neutral spot to sit for pushing exercises, about 3/4 on the glide board. This way, when I make that push, I don't have the machine kind of bottoming out. You get a nice full range of motion. Now, something I didn't mention here was notice where these handles kind of ended up. And again, if you guys watch this channel for a while, I've already mentioned this many times. You guys may have already caught this, but again, this isn't really intuitive for a lot of people. When they first get this, they might have sat down like this and hold the machine like this. There are some exercises you can do with the straps on the outside, but for the most part, anytime I'm doing like a push seated away from the machine, I want to have the straps kind of going underneath my forearms to set up. That'll make a big difference, as I'll just show you simply. If I'm going to press here, you can see this isn't very comfortable. This clip is going to be rubbing against my forearms. It's not very comfortable at all. Kind of limits the range of motion as I'm kind of pressing. So by having it underneath here, I have a lot more flexibility. It gets out of my way, it doesn't cause me any problems. This would be the logical way to kind of press it. Again, I would probably think about having that closed grip so it doesn't slip out of your hands, especially if you're older and you're feeling a little uneasy about this. If you're holding it like this, it can kind of slip off the machine. Now, just like before, there's a lot of things we could talk about just in this position. But before I even get going, basically I want to make sure that, again, I have good posture. I'm not sitting like this, kind of hunched over, and it might feel like you might want to, because again, this is awkward. You're sitting at an incline, this thing's pulling you backwards. You might kind of want to be sitting like this. Be mindful of posture. If you got a mirror, that would be a good thing, but try and sit nice and upright. Shoulder blades are kind of pulled back, just like we have with the row, and this would be the ideal setup. Again, I would say as a beginner, just kind of have your legs on the floor. You can kind of choose how much pressure. You can take the legs off if you want to try it. Even the lean of my torso makes a difference. I can sit upright as I press, or I can kind of choose to lean into it a little bit more and press this way. Again, working on my feet in the ground, and I can do a little bit of both. My feet are guiding me, but I'm still kind of doing a lot of work. If you guys start to feel comfortable, this is something I realized for a lot of people. This seemed pretty easy for me at first, but for a lot of people, this was really unstable. I think you saw in the beginner video, I mentioned how the person doing that kind of fell off the machine. If you want to get used to just practicing this, what I would say is maybe practice first having no legs, just no feet touching, kind of standing like this, holding this position, going a little bit slower, making sure you feel comfortable. And then maybe you can practice just simply holding this position and maybe doing little presses. It's going to help too if your head's up. If I have my head down as I'm looking and pressing, people start pressing this way and it kind of feels like I'm going to lean forward. If I'm going to be doing this kind of kneeling, kind of leaning over press, I want to have my head looking straight ahead. This way, I'm still kind of upright. I'm not leaning so much where I'm like having my body fall into it. So kind of think about that too. We established kind of how to sit on the glide board. The next thing is just kind of where to position the hands for a traditional chest press. What I find people to do, even if you instruct them to kind of get to this position, they might do stuff that's kind of like this, very tight, or maybe it's really wide and high, or they're doing stuff where they're arcing back here and pressing out this way. A couple things to remember first is that we want this distance in our elbows to be about like right here. I don't want them kind of flared out here. I don't want them kind of too close here. All these are little variations that you could choose to do later. If I wanted like close grip presses, I could do that. But for a typical press, we want it somewhere like right here to press. And as I'm here, I'm going to be essentially locked in this position. So I got some tension. I'm going to lean into it. I'm not going to hang off my shoulders like that, but somewhat moderate, that my hands are going to be even basically with like my chest line right here. Not even with my shoulder line. So as I'm pressing, I ideally want to press right through my chest line. It's okay if I kind of arc through it at an incline, that's fine. But what I want to avoid is pressing through my shoulder line. I want to kind of avoid that. And that shouldn't be the case as long as your hands are kind of locked in this position. Now let's say you're at this position, people tend to start doing this. They start opening up here and going out this way. I want kind of an arc, so as I'm here, the finished product should look like this. As I'm pressing, I'm finishing through in this little slight arc. And there's nothing wrong with doing what I'm doing, where I have my feet here and I'm kind of guiding myself. If you want to work nice and slow, honestly, as I'm doing this here, I'm getting kind of fatigued just doing this, and I'm using my legs to kind of help me, but I'm going super, super slow. You can try this for yourself. You'll notice this is still pretty fatiguing, but you should essentially feel it here. It's okay if you start feeling it in your shoulders. I mean, it's going to take some time for your body to kind of feel these certain areas over time as you kind of develop them to kind of get used to that motor pattern, because your body is going to do the path of least resistance. So it's going to start pressing and utilizing more of your shoulders as I'm kind of pressing in neutral, or pressing, just kind of getting used to this position. But ideally, again, think about as I'm in this position, you should feel these muscles being stretched out here, and those same muscles that are stretched are now the ones that I want to press and follow through with. Now we're going to do just shoulder presses in a second, inverted shoulder presses. You can actually set this up a number of different ways. Honestly, I would say do whatever is to your preference. You can try and mix and match both if you guys would like. I could press with the angle this way, or I can switch it. So we'll just do it from here. So just like with the pull-ups, I want you essentially pulling in a straight line. With the presses, same thing. I'd ideally like you kind of pressing it as straight as possible and not kind of pressing out this way. So people might start doing this, where they're kind of having their elbows drived up and they're pushing this way. Again, you can kind of do that. You're still gonna be working your shoulders and our triceps as we're doing this, but keep it as much as you can where you're pressing more so in a straight line. So as I'm starting, I'm pressing and I'm following through my biceps or even with my ears. And then just like before, I don't want to sit too far back on the machine because then I'm just kind of doing these partial reps. Now, just like in the gym, people are used to going to the gym doing like traditional shoulder presses. They'll hold the dumbbells right here and they'll just do these kind of like 90-degree presses, which is fine. Some people just aren't used to pressing this low. There's a time and place maybe for doing a little bit of both. What's great about the Total Gym is I think it kind of reinforces that nice full range of motion. But I'm also respectful of the fact that some people just might not have that range of motion yet. So you can actually use this to your advantage to work within your capabilities of your shoulder mobility, which is pretty cool. So I mean, if you have limited range of motion, lower the tower height. That works good for you, where you can do this kind of pain-free. Where if I wanted to, I could do kind of partial reps, and I can stop when I, want to stop at a certain point. However, if I want to get a little lower, I'm going to sit a little further at the end of the sled, and then I have a nice, greater range of motion in my shoulders. All right, so wrapping up the upper body stuff, we did fundamentals of pulling, fundamentals of pushing. We'll get to legs in a second, but the only thing I want to touch on briefly is just fundamentals of just single joint actions. We did a lot of multi-joint in the sense that we worked our shoulders and our arms, our shoulders and our elbows through all these different pushing and pulling motions. Now we'll just look at some isolated exercises. We'll look at a couple we'll do arms first actually. One thing that I found that I was surprised at, some people kind of mentioned, was that, which is it's understandable, but even the simple bicep curl. What's a simple bicep curl? If we're doing a normal dumbbell curl, it's just our elbows flexing, whether it's a dumbbell or a cable or whatever. That gets a little kind of different, feels a little awkward from like just a receptive point of view as us sitting on this glide board in this incline, because now we're pulling from this angle. It's still the same rules. We just want the elbow to move. We don't want our shoulder to move. If I had you guys with a dumbbell and I said, is this like correct form when I'm doing a dumbbell curl like that? We'd all say it doesn't necessarily look right because it's just our elbow is supposed to move. Our shoulders shouldn't necessarily be moving. With a Total Gym, I find the same thing. People start doing this, or they'll start doing this. They're kind of like rowing and they're doing a bicep curl, kind of like that, or like I said, something like that. Think about, you can keep the elbows pinned in or they can be up here, but the point is I just want my keeping that same posture I had before, nice and upright, shoulder blades are pinned back, and just my elbows are going to move. That's the only thing that's moving. My shoulders are essentially pinned right where they are. I can keep them pinned at my side, or I can have them lengthen out and do it this way. But either way, on both of those bicep curls, my elbow is the only joint that's moving. So you could do bicep curls that way. You could do them kind of seated this way. But again, I don't want to start doing that. This would be kind of incorrect. I'd want to lean over at least a little bit, and I ideally take my feet off the ground, and I could just flex my elbow and do bicep curls this way. But I respect the fact that some people might kind of fall over and I feel comfortable doing that. I personally love this one a lot. If you get to a point where this feels comfortable, this is another one that I like a lot. But again, for a lot of people, it's going to feel a little tricky initially. For some people as well, I didn't go over this yet, but same rules. I'm seated here. I'm just going to simply kind of fall back in my back, take my feet up, and then it's the same rules. This way it kind of pins my elbows to my side, and I'm just flexing my elbows this way. Okay, so we're all essentially doing the same idea. And the same thing rings true with tricep extensions. No matter how I want to do it, if I want to work my triceps, it's just the opposite. I just want to get full range of motion, flexing just my elbow, not using my shoulder. So I keep it flexed in here, and just my elbows moving through a full range of motion. I'm not stopping here and just doing that because that'd be kind of partial reps. I want to get as much flexion of my elbow and as much extension of my elbow as possible. For the sake of time, I'm not going to do it, but you can do face up, a number of different ways you can do it. The main thing is just focusing on your elbow flexing and extending. We can do multi-joint with our back muscles and even shoulders. And again, for the sake of time, I won't make this exhaustive. I have other videos that I'll link down below that you guys can check out. But I just am mentioning this because people make this mistake a lot, and I saw this. People just doing a pullover. You could do pullover this way, but again, I don't want to start pulling over, flexing my elbows. A pullover is meant to work my lats. When these muscles contract, they help pull the arm down in a very different directions, either straight back or straight off to the side this way. So I'm lengthening out. I'm not going to bend my elbows this time. I'm just going to pull straight down with my shoulders. All right. Some people will say they feel it in the triceps. I mean, that's normal to be expected, but really you're working probably your lats. I could do this here as well, but again, I want to avoid kind of doing this type stuff. I mean, this has a purpose. You're working something here, but to really isolate the lats, I want to keep the elbows slightly bent, not totally locked out, just slightly bent, and just pulling over off to the side with my back muscles. All right, then finally, we're just going to talk about some of the fundamentals of the legs. Now, it goes without saying, I'll link these down below in all the videos in the description box. You can find the Total Gym Attachment website to get this one. I'll link that down below. There's this Great Flex option too. You can get that on Amazon. I'll say this since I got the image here. The only thing I noticed though is the Great Flex is not holding up as well as the Total Gym. The Total Gym, these bottoms are nice and straight. The Great Flex bottoms have started to kind of wear a little bit. So I'm just mentioning that in this video. Maybe I'll mention another video. Now what I'm gonna do here, it's really beneficial if you don't have this, as in every video, if you don't have this larger squat stand, definitely buy one. Make sure it matches with your Total Gym or your sliding bench trainer. People have a hard time getting in and out of this, which I understand. So especially, look how low I am. Most people are not used to getting this low where their hips are below their knee. So you may need something to help you get out of that, whether that's a stool or a table of some sort, a rope hooked up to something to kind of pull you out, or just another person to help you out of this. You could do something like this, or since you got this incline, you could just kind of scoot yourself up a little bit higher. And then at the very least, now my hip's above my knee, I can lean into it this way, raise my hips and stand up that way. I know for a lot of people it's like, well, this seems kind of like basic, but there's a lot of people who use this machine that are older, again, morbidly obese, have a hard time getting in and out of this machine, or just have an injury or some sort. There's creative ways you can get in and out of this machine. I got the pulley detached, that should be obvious. Let me make sure the thing just kind of comes off. And now I'm going to show you how you just kind of properly set up your feet and how you kind of set yourself up just doing a basic squatting or leg press pattern. Now, if you didn't have this squat stand, like I said, you're going to be kind of at a very big disadvantage because it's going to stop somewhere like here. And if I start squatting, it's going to limit your range of motion and your knees are going to go past your ankles. We don't necessarily want that to happen. If the top of the sling was right here, or the top of the squat stand was here, I would say get your feet off the squat stand at the very least. Since we got this bigger squat stand, that's ideal. We want to get our feet kind of as high as positioned as we can. And the key thing whenever you're using the squat stand, if you're using 2 feet on here, is this how your feet should look. Feet are kind of turned out a little bit. They can be even higher depending on what other stuff. But if they're close here and I try to do something basic like squatting down and coming up this way, I can't go that much lower if my feet are close together like this. If I get them wide and I drive my knees out, now I can get much lower. And that allows us to press not just through our quadriceps, but also our hamstrings and then our butt muscles, our glutes, and a greater range of motion. So for some people, again, this looks fairly easy. It's not like super complicated, but this would be the range of motion I would like. Now, some people, if you sit a little higher up, you're only doing this. So you're gonna have to, if you can, get as low as you can. Now for some people, that's gonna be hard. You can hold this, but you can get nice and low this way. Now, if you wanna do just like the basic, lying on your back, leg press, same thing, my feet nice and high. If you got this bigger squat stand, they're turned out a little bit. Big thing is here, some people would naturally just kind of do this. And if I press, there's, you can see there's not a whole lot of range of motion I'm doing. Ideally, I want to get as low as I can. If I can get my butt down here, that would be ideal. Now I'm nice and low here. Being this low is great because since my hips are below my knees, this is going to require my butt to do a lot of that initial movement and my quadriceps too, but then I'll start incorporating my hamstrings too about that position right there. So now I get a much bigger range of motion. You can see nice and low. Even if you weren't doing this for strength, if you're older or someone just has like mobility issues in your hips and legs, you can see this is like a moving flexibility. And this is a great thing to do, even if it's low stress. If you're just sitting here like watching TV or listening to something, this would be a great thing to do. It's very low impact. Do this for many reps as you want to do. Now, conversely, if you feel like this is too easy, and you're not getting much, there's other videos I have where you can attach resistance bands to different positions of the machine. Otherwise, you can simply just do this. Like I said, I'm keeping those same fundamentals. I'm nice and low as possible. My foot's higher up the machine, just making the exact same pattern I had before, and I'm going to press through a single leg. And I can do it this way as well. I'm just trying to avoid having that knee kind of cross in doing that. I want my knee to always be over, kind of tracking over my first and second toe. Not over where it's going this over, but just over where this, essentially my knees right on top of my ankles as I'm pressing. Now once you're done, again, speaking to people that either are older or have disabilities, you can, again, use this as kind of a nice crutch. You have to be able to pull it out though. As I'm holding onto this, I can kind of lean into this and then push, either help myself get up, or I didn't mention as you want to get down, you can use this as well. It's also a good thing to have. So if you're a beginner, you might be looking for like some sort of program once you kind of learn some of these basic fundamentals. I have a whole playlist on my channel that just is called programs. There's a number of different variations and things you guys can do. To make it even simpler, what I would recommend is you could look at those and have other I'd recommend, but I would say just take it really simply. Just go over these different patterns that I discussed today. Literally just go through 1 to 2 of those pushing exercises, like the chest ones, the shoulder one. Do a couple, 1 or 2 different variations of pulling. You can do some of the leg, fundamental leg stuff I did. Basically, one of each of those positions I showed you today, if you just worked on that for 2 to 3 times a week for a period of like a month or 2 months, just depending how acclimated and how used you got, comfortable you got with the machine, that honestly would be perfect to kind of get used to using the machine. If you just want more of an express, more sped up way, want to program right away, you can definitely look at that program playlist. Otherwise, just picking 1 to 2 of these things I definitely recommend. Or like I said, just jump down below in the description box. There's some other fundamental videos that I'd recommend, and likely by the time this video is posted, I'll put together a beginner program playlist if you guys want to check that out on the YouTube channel. Otherwise, thanks again for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next video.